Hi everyone, and welcome back to Coachy TV. In this video we're going to look at another transitionary workout that's going to get you from your specific prep part of the season to the pre-comp or pre-competitive part of the season, and that's a long hill interval. We did a similar type of look at another transition workout, which was also a hill workout, medium hill intervals, and showed us how we got from general prep into specific prep. And so the same thing is kind of happening here with this more intense, more specific type of workout. There are some similarities between the long hill intervals and both the medium and the short hill intervals that we've done. We've already taken a look at here, and we've hopefully been doing or building toward in your own cross-country macrocycle. But there are some really key differences that show you why you would do this at this part of the year, getting toward that last third of your calendar year, getting yourself specifically ready for the championship races. So some really critical differences here that we will point out and why you would want to be doing those. So the long hill intervals, we're really looking at how does this help transition between the phases, both specific prep and the pre-con phases, and what adaptations does this help create? Why are we even doing this to get us from one part of our adaptation to another to get more fit and be ready for those championship races? What you're seeing here in this picture is a still picture from one of our long hill interval workouts last cross-country season. There are two places that we can do this workout, or that I found that we can do this workout. We are just north of Tampa, Florida, and it's not a very it's a very flat part of the country, not a lot of hills, so we have to go north to either a town called St. Leo or a town called Brooksville. This picture is from the Brooksville version of that, and we can do either of those. They both work very nicely for it. That's the image that you're seeing here as we were doing one of the reps last year. So let's go ahead and get right to the workout itself. I'm Kyle Giacono, the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida, and I have been for the last 7 years. A closer look at my credentials are on the screen. So as always, we take a look at the race metrics in the 5K. Always important to know what the race entails. If we were trying to get ready for the 10K or the 800, we would certainly be looking at a different set of parameters, but most of the country is getting ready for the cross-country 5K, so that's why I'm showing how this particular workout can help you get ready for that race. So, study that was released by Ingham in 2008, they looked at a bunch of different races, and when they really focused in on the 5K, they found that it was very clear what was the biggest predictor at who won the race and who did not win the race, and that was VO2 max. Who could run the fastest aerobically is another way of looking at it. VO2 max, or the volume where oxygen level is being used at its max, that's what VO2 max basically stands for. And they found that if you had the higher VO2 max, you won the 5K 94.3% of the time. That's very close to a sure thing in cross country. So that's why, if you've looked at my videos, I've always really talked a lot about VO2 max being a big part of it. Even if there's other aspects for training, how can we touch on VO2 max in these workouts, or how can we not negatively impact VO2 max while we're doing something else? And this is the reason why. That is almost a sure thing. Looking at the USA Track and Field distance curriculum, we will find that the 5K is run at 97% of your VO2 max pace. The best, or one of the best field tests for finding somebody's pace at which they reach VO2 max, or their velocity at which they reach VO2 max, is to run 2 miles to exhaustion. Obviously 2 miles, you're going to run that faster than you run a 5K, but it's fairly close. So that is why there's that close association. You run it at 97%, or just a little bit slower you run your 5K than is your VO2 max pace. Again, probably why there's that very close association. And this study that was released by Dr. Matter and Dr. Hartman in 2018, they worked very closely with the IAAF. And when they looked at the 5K specifically, they found that 4% of the energy that is contributed to resupplying or recharging ATP when done at race pace in the 5K, only at race pace, because if you just walk it, this is not going to be the case, but at actual race pace, they found that 4% of the energy was being supplied by the ATP that was sitting in your muscle before you start, and this phosphocreatine system that quickly recharges ADP into ATP. That's collectively called the alactic energy system. It has to do with a lot of specific strength, and it's kind of the surge at the very end of a race if you have somebody that's developed this energy system. 10% of the energy comes from the anaerobic glycolytic system. That is the second fastest way the body can recharge ADP into ATP, and it's also the one that, if done unchecked, can cause an accumulation of acid and that jelly-legged feeling that if you go out too fast and don't settle into race pace. So 10% of it comes from that, which is a pretty sizable chunk, certainly not something we want to throw away, and it's why you can't just look at aerobic when you're dealing with the 5K. But then 86% of the energy is being supplied by the aerobic system, so obviously we do have to do most of, if not a lot of our work there. Again, filling in this idea of VO2 max. VO2 max is the fastest aerobic pace, so again, this very close association between VO2 max and the large supply of energy that's coming from the aerobic systems, aerobic mechanic actually, or mechanism for recharging ATP. Really, we have one energy system in the body and three main ways to, or three mechanisms to recharge that energy. If you want to think about it that way, it's probably more accurate. One of the interesting things we're going to look at when we look at long hill intervals is they can really touch on all three of these ways of resupplying ATP, with a huge focus being on the VO2 max aspect, both central and peripheral. So that's why this workout is really important. We'll get to the details of that in a little bit. So, law of training specificity, we always take a look at this and always want to keep in mind, it seems simple, but it's very profound in terms of how it impacts anything that you're doing. The race you decide to run, the workouts you decide to do, all these things are encompassed in this one sort of idea, which is that every training session has a very specific effect on the athlete, okay? You do workout A, adaptation A is going to happen. You do workout B, and you're going to get adaptation B. If you do workout A and expect adaptation B to happen, you're not really paying any attention to this very important law of training specificity, because your body is only going to adapt to what it gives it. Your body is not, it's not wasteful. It's only going to adapt to what you need. Somebody who lives where I am in Tampa, Florida at this time of year is going to adapt to the heat that somebody who's living in a much colder climate would never need to, because why would your body? In the same way that if I were to go somewhere like, I don't know, North Dakota in the middle of the winter, I'm going to have a very, very hard time with the cold weather because my body is not adapted to it. The same way with this. And if we want to do workouts that need to get us better at VO2 max and all these other things in the right ratio, we have to do workouts that supply it, that create those adaptations. And that's the first part of it. And the more profound part is that adaptation that you're getting in the athlete, which may or may not be desired for the event. The idea being that all workouts could be good, but it depends on, the event you're looking at, who the athlete is, why you're doing it, and all those different things. So this idea of just because you're training does not mean you're making yourself better. That's really what the law of training specificity means. You have to consider the event, you have to consider the athlete, and what are you trying to accomplish in that day, that week, that phase, that whole season, and make sure they all blend together in a very scientific and logical way. So both the science and the art of coaching coming together, right? So what we want to consider with all that we just said is, how do long hill intervals specifically support performance in the 5K, cross-country 5K? And if they don't, then we shouldn't be doing them. But if they do, and if they do as profoundly as I believe that they absolutely do, in terms of all of these aspects we're looking at here, then we better make sure we get them in. But because of how difficult and challenging these workouts are, we better put them in the right part of the year so that we're ready for them, so they're not just whatever. So those are the things that we really have to consider here as we go through this presentation. All right, so where do these workouts sort of fit in terms of the Macrocycle, which has 5 parts? 4 of those 5 parts include actual training, because the first part is transitionary phase, which is involving rest and recovery. The second phase, general preparation, which you're just preparing for more intense work later on. That's where we focus in your summer training and for cross country and your winter training for track, focusing mainly or almost entirely on the aerobic system, as well as some specific strength in the alactic energy system. Then the specific preparation phase, once you've had all that in place, and that's basically half your training year is going to be general prep. You're getting to specific prep phase, which you're specifically preparing for the demands of the race. You're adding in that anaerobic glycolytic system, and you're getting that starting to prime. So both the aerobic, anaerobic glycolytic, and alactic system are all at their best at the most important time. Going into pre-competitive, where you're preparing for the most important meets, and that's where the hardest training is. And then the competition phase is the big-time races, where really the races are dictating almost everything. These workouts fit right in there, transitioning from specific prep, where you're preparing for demands of the race, and getting you into the pre-competitive phase. And you'll see why that is, because it really, again, hits on all the specific parts of training, but they are really also getting very, very intense and really directly relating to these most intense part of the training year as you get into the pre-competitive phase. All right, the energy continuum, this is where basically that slide before where we talked about 97% is the pace at which you run your 5K based on your VO2 max from the USATF distance curriculum. So basically VO2 max, just to sort of summarize these lots of different things on here, because this is all the paces you would train, all the aerobic paces from easy type training to lactic threshold to extensive tempo, which includes VO2 max. Intensive tempo, these are the glycolytic workouts in here, special 1, special 2, speed endurance, which you would not be doing in cross-country season, and the anaerobic alactic system. VO2 max is right here, your 2-mile pace, and the 5K is right here, again showing that very close association between these two. The 10K is right here, just to kind of get an idea with it. Things like the 1 mile, so 1 mile type training, while there are things that are going to be similar, are going to be almost as close to 800 as they are to 3,200 meter pace, and less specific to the 5K. So that's why you wouldn't do your mile workouts, so your 800 meter workouts, just for a 5K, even if you have an 800 meter type runner getting ready for it, because the demands of the race are very different. Now you would tweak them for the athlete, but the demands of the race are still the demands of the race. If you were trying to get ready for the marathon and you were a middle distance runner, you would still have to get ready for the demands of that race, even though your specific nature is going to be a little bit different in terms of the workouts, but you still have to consider the race itself and then the athlete afterwards, because the race is, the demands of the race are not going to change. You can tweak things once you know those demands. So when we look at in specific prep, the workouts that we're continuing to target were the same ones that we did in general prep, and I have some videos in the description down below about those workout types. And then we also started to target the remaining areas, which included the anaerobic glycolytic system. So basically, general prep, we trained VO2 max and to the right, so VO2 max aerobic power to aerobic threshold, and we also did the anaerobic alactic. Those are like your fly 30s. In specific prep, we added basically everything on this continuum except I told you speed endurance. I would not do for cross country 5K. It's just not, same thing with 3,200 meter. It's just not really specific for it. An 800 meter runner absolutely would do that pace, but that would be a completely different part of the year. So the reason for that is that the anaerobic glycolytic system takes 9 to 11 weeks to prime, whereas the aerobic system takes 20 to 25. If we trained this anaerobic glycolytic system in the summertime, it would be peaking, sometime in August or September, and then would be in a down phase and not at its peak at the state meet, which in Florida, hopefully ours is going to be on September 7th. Yours might be a little bit different, but that's the idea of not training all the specific demands of the race. In general prep, you wait till specific prep. So we're going to start doing these workouts at the end of specific prep to transition to pre-comp for all those reasons that it fits in with the specific prep. But when we look at pre-comp, we also have to target all those aspects that we needed in specific prep, right? So all that are needed for success in those races, but it has to be in the hardest possible way, okay? And it needs to be 4 to 8 weeks before the top meets. Why is that? Top meets, championship meets, just was going to fit really funny on this. But basically, you want to do this pre-comp. You have to hit all targets, all parts of this, these areas that are aspects needed for success in the race, in this case, the cross-country 5K, basically everything in specific prep. But pre-comp, they have to be the hardest possible way you're targeting them, the hardest workouts of the year. You start doing them in specific prep to get yourself ready for them later on. Now that we get into pre-comp, which long hills get us ready for, which is going to be 4 to 8 weeks before the top meets, they have to be the hardest workout types. You're really hitting these aspects for success in the event really hard. Why is that? It's because of the fact that adaptations need 2 to 4 weeks. So these things that you're doing 4 to 8 weeks in front of are going to directly impact things like state meet success, right? You don't do your hardest workout the week of the state meet, because you're not going to adapt for it. You really don't do it 2 weeks before the state meet, because 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to get some benefit. Obviously, even doing it the week of, you're going to get some benefit. But if the body takes 2 to 4 weeks to adapt, well, you need to be doing that in that 2 to 4 week window directly before and basically 2 times before. And that's that idea of 4 to 8 weeks, right? 1 to 3 weeks, that's generally what I think of as the competitive phase where the most important meets are happening. Pre-comp needs to be in that time directly in front of it, because that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck for really hitting those workouts really hard, and it's going to give you the most impact in those really important meets. That's the whole idea of pre-comp, and these long hill intervals are going to transition you from specific prep into pre-comp, and that should again clue you in. These are very, very challenging workouts to accomplish. But while they're very, very challenging, they also are going to hit all these aspects, and the real question we have to figure out is, why is it so important? Why is it so important? I mean, they're really, really hard. They're going to be draining on the athlete. So why is it that they help both or all aspects of this energy continuum when we're really looking at it. Let's go ahead and get a little bit more into this. So, first off, we're going to think a little bit about acid levels. I had a difficulty of figuring out where to put this slide. I could have put it after the slide we're going to look at, and you're going to see why. But just as a reminder that acid levels at various intensities, this is on average for a trained athlete. Somebody who's not trained is not going to be able to reach these high levels of lactate in the blood because they're just not going to be able to handle it. It's wrong to say that your body starts developing acid at any point, right? You're always developing acid. You just sitting here listening to this presentation, your body is producing acid because your body produces energy in the three ways we talked about: alactic, glycolytic, and aerobic, all the times, even when you're sleeping. So if we look at this chart here, just at rest, you're going to get 0.8 to 1.8 millimoles of lactate, which we measure the lactate, but that also comes in a 1-to-1 ratio with the acid, the free hydrogen ions that float around along with it. So that just proves the fact that there's never a point when you're not developing acid. In fact, your mitochondria need the acid for its own aerobic respiration, so it's a really nice cycle when it's in unison. Lactic threshold is the pace where it's the fastest pace you can go and be able to produce and clear it in unison. And it's about 2.5 millimoles of lactate. So anything above that, or more than 2.5 millimoles of lactate, is considered acidic or acidosis, and that means that you're going to have to stop the workout or stop the race because of the accumulation of acid, not because of fuel stores or anything like that, if you're in shape. If we look at the 5K, the one that we're really focusing on here, we'll find that it's 9 millimoles of lactate is at race pace what a person is typically at when trained. Now, there's variations there, obviously, but that is the general idea. When we're doing our VO2 max type workouts, or we're doing the 2 mile, which is basically the same thing, it's a little bit higher, 12 millimoles of lactate. Obviously, a 400 is the workout or the race that we think of that produces the most acid, and that's absolutely true. 24 millimoles of lactate, even though most of that is actually produced in the first about 150 meters. It still does continue to accumulate. This is actually why that study that Dr. Matter and Dr. Hartman found that the 400 is a little bit more aerobic than we used to give it credit for, but that's sort of the idea. So 9 millimoles of lactate, though, is what we really want to look at for getting ourselves ready for the 5K. So our goal is to get them, either yourself or who you're training, used to race-specific acidity levels so they can develop the specific ability to buffer this acid concentration. And I bolded and underlined the word buffer for a very particular reason, because no human can tolerate acid accumulation in muscles. I've talked about this in previous workouts or workout videos, but you hear that all the time. Oh, we got to tolerate the acid. You really hear it a lot with sprint coaches who are really doing a lot of acid buffering capacity type workouts. We got to tolerate the acid, and no human being can tolerate the acid, not really. You really mean buffer the acid, and here's sort of the analogy. If you turn on your stove, the stovetop, and you touch it, it's going to burn your hand. And you can do that every day for a year, and every time you do it, you're still going to burn your hand, right? You might develop a slight tolerance, a slight callus to where you can hold your hand on that stovetop for a quarter second more, but in the end, you're really not tolerating it in any way, not in any really meaningful way. And that's how the human body really deals with acid accumulation or acidosis in the body. What we really want to do, if we want to be able to put our hand on that stovetop for a longer period, is we have to put something in between our hand and the stovetop, basically an oven mitt. We're trying to, with acid buffering capacity enhancements in the athlete, we are trying to basically put an oven mitt on the athlete, basically their cells, so that for lack of a better term, the acid doesn't burn their inside the way your hand would get burnt if you touched the stovetop. That's what we're thinking about with acid buffering capacity. We're not tolerating it, we are buffering it by putting things into the body that neutralize the acid to get the pH closer back to neutral. Too much and too fast of this acid can damage mitochondria, reducing aerobic energy production. We don't want that. 86% of the energy comes from it. So we need to slowly introduce them to this. This is why you would not do long hill intervals at the very beginning of specific prep, and definitely not in general prep, right? We had to get ourselves used to all the different things to get ourselves ready for it, including some acid producing workouts at the beginning and in the middle of specific prep. Not acid producing, I'm sorry, acid accumulating. See, it's really easy to think of it that way, but that's not what it is. It's acid accumulating. Long hills will expose the athlete to acid levels very similar to what they'd experience at race pace in the cross-country 5K for a sustained period of time. These reps, long hill intervals, are long. and it's going to get them ready to buffering the acid. See, it's so easy to just kind of say it that way, to buffer the acid and to delay the fatigue until the end of the actual race or the end of the actual rep. That's one of the things that these workouts, long hill intervals, can really do a great job of doing by getting them right at this 9 millimoles of lactate for a very sustained period of time so they can do it in the race itself. Alright, so we just gave a sneak preview at one of the designed adaptations of long hill intervals, but what are all the designed adaptations we're looking for here? So, specific strength, which has a little bit to do with the alactic energy system. It's going to increase force production because of the hill, going uphill. You're going to have a high heart rate. It's going to be at or right over 180. It's harder to get it way over 180 because of the sustained nature of it, but sort of like those short hill and medium hill intervals, you're going to have a very high heart rate on these. Because of the plyometric nature of going up a hill, you're going to have muscle elasticity. It's plyometric type work, so you're going to get that specific strength, that ability to get back what you put into the ground when you hit it. Contractile power, so that's force production, central nervous system pathways, similar to both the short and medium hill intervals that we did earlier in the year. However, the sustained nature of these reps make the strength much more specific to what's needed during the cross-country 5K, basically the sustained nature. Obviously, if you did those short hill intervals earlier on in the season, you're going to say those are very different than anything you're doing in a cross-country 5K, and even the medium hills you did. This is the kind of strength that you need for the sustained nature of the cross-country 5K. There's sustained strength that you absolutely need in these types of reps. We're also looking for a specific aerobic ability. This is aerobic energy system. The extended nature of these reps, and we'll get into what that is in the next slide, means they will be much more aerobic energy being produced here than anaerobic, either alactic or glycolytic, or both of those together, right? They're a long rep, so it's going to have most of the energy supplied aerobically, and it's in a very specific, high, intense sort of way. But these are relatively high intensity, very similar to VO2 max aerobic power intervals. I think of these basically as the closest thing as being a VO2 max interval day, or basically fake peripheral VO2 max development on these days. You're getting your muscles to extract the most oxygen out of your blood because of the high aerobic intense nature of these and them being so sustained. So if you want to think what are these most similar to, if you had to pencil them into one workout type, I find they're most similar to VO2 max aerobic power intervals. Video in the description down below if you haven't seen our videos on those. And then also we've got, as we mentioned in the last slide, specific acid buffering capacity with the glycolytic energy system, the anaerobic glycolytic energy system, the extended nature and relatively high intensity, right? The idea that these are close to VO2 max aerobic power of these reps mean there's a significant contribution from the anaerobic glycolytic system. Anything over lactic threshold, and there is going to be an accumulation of acid. The sustained nature of these, plus the relatively high intensity, plus the fact that there's a hill involved, there's going to be a significant accumulation of acid very close to race intensity. While not super fast, the acid will accumulate to levels like what they will experience during the cross-country 5K. So what do we say here? Alactic energy production, 4% of the energy. Aerobic energy production in a very specific way, very close to peripheral VO2 max, which is the biggest thing for winning the 5K is VO2 max. That's 86% of the energy. And we've got the glycolytic energy system being really taxed here in a sustained way, 10% of the energy. If you do these correctly, the designed adaptation of the long hill intervals is going to target all three ways of recharging ADP into ATP in a very specific way similar to what is needed for the cross-country 5K. That's why these workouts are so important and why they really get you ready for, you know, the last third of your training year, but why you can't do them earlier in the year, why you have to build to these to make sure that all of these ways of producing energy and all the other parts that make up, you know, you as a distance or middle distance athlete running cross country are getting closer to their prime so that you can handle all of these things happening all at once. All right, so how do we actually accomplish this in the workout? What is the training design of the long hill interval? So basically you're going to do one of these per microcycle, and remember your microcycle here in specific prep is going to be longer, so it's more like 9 days, so it's not every week. But one per microcycle. Toward the end of specific prep, I would say the last 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how your actual microcycles fall, and the beginning of pre-comp. Again, maybe the first cycle or second cycle of the pre-competitive phase, depending on how things fall. You want to get about 3 to 5 of these in during your overall macrocycle. Same thing that you were trying to look for in your medium hill intervals. So you do about maybe 8 to 10 short hill intervals, 3 to 5 medium hills, and 3 to 5 long hill intervals. And that's sort of that design of building yourself up to the most important meets, getting yourself into pre-comp and eventually the competitive phase. So these long hill intervals meaning incomplete recovery. Now there's going to be a lot of recovery for these, but it's because these workouts are so demanding. Intervals mean incomplete recovery, allows for larger amounts of somewhat higher intensity work, meaning you couldn't do these straight through, so you get more overall volume because of the interval break period. Find a safe hill with a 2 to 3% incline of about 1,000 meters to 1,600 meters, okay? And 2 to 3%, the reason for that is it doesn't change your running mechanics for flat ground, so you're not changing anything that may not be specific for your actual race, right? Basically, it should be about the steepness of a freeway on-ramp, off-ramp, something like that. So 1,000 meters to 1,600 meters, it does sort of depend on the nature of your athlete and how far they're going to be going, because it's going to be a timed rep. But basically, if you go to 1,600 meters, you're not going to probably have anybody that gets all the way to 1,600 meters in the entirety of these 5-minute type reps. Each rep should be fast, but should be replicated throughout. So you're not giving them a target time, but basically, on the first one, wherever they get to, you can have them maybe drop their shirt or just find some sort of landmark that they know that they're supposed to be getting to each time, replicated throughout. So you don't want to go really fast on the first one and then not get close and then be good on the last one. You want to be able to be as fast as you can for the actual time. And you're going to go 3 to 5 minutes on these reps. I like 4 to 4.5 minutes. I think 5, there's really not a hill that I can necessarily do it, because my fastest boy will get close to the top of the hill that we get to. We don't actually have one that'll go 1,600 meters, here in Florida. So that's kind of for our situation. 4 to 4.5 minutes is the top and that I do, but not because of the actual. I mean, if I had the ability to, I probably would go all the way out to 5 minutes. It's just for our situation. Again, think VO2 max intensity. This is not mile pace. This is not 800 meter pace. This is basically 2 mile pace uphill. So it's relatively fast, but it's not all out. I would start with about 3 reps and build to 4 to 5. I would not do more than 5 with any high school athlete. Rest is extensive, 10 to 12 minutes active jogging the whole time. They're basically going to get a mile on the recovery part. This is a high volume day, right? These are the hardest workouts you'll do, that should say all year, without any question, right? Without any question, these are the hardest workouts they're going to do all year. So you absolutely have to give them a long rest interval. And even that, even after 10 to 12 minutes, it's still going to be challenging to get to the number 2 and number 3 and maybe 4 to 5, depending on how many you think you need to get done. The rest is extensive. If not, there'd be no way they could replicate. These are very challenging workouts. Pick what makes sense for your kids or yourself and adjust if it takes longer to the top of the hill. So if they can't get to the top of the hill, say maybe you want everybody to go 4 minutes, just maybe call out for everybody to stop wherever they get to, and that's their sort of mark to get to. If they can get to the top of whatever hill you have, kind of like with the medium hills and the short hill intervals, great. Get to the top of the hill. If you did it in 4:17, try and do it in 4:17 on all of them, just so it's very consistent. Overall outlook, start these to conclude the second rotation. Remember, we talked about doing hills and rotations, first with medium hills for about 5 weeks, go away from 2 weeks. Second rotation with hills, you start with short hills and then go to medium hills, go away from it for 2 weeks. This is your third rotation with hills. So you're going to conclude your medium hills with this. You did probably 1 or 2 medium hills. You're going to conclude this third hill rotation, 5-week block of hills, with these long hill intervals. This should be about the last 2 or so weeks of specific prep, as we mentioned, and consider them through the first week or 2 of the pre-competitive phase. Again, these are the hardest workouts you'll do all year. I cannot overstate this. These are very challenging workouts, the hardest ones you're probably going to do all year. So be careful with them. They are important for all the reasons we've already said, but be careful with them. Some athletes may not be ready to do them in their first year, or may only be able to do a couple of reps. Maybe you can only do them for maybe 2 minutes. So please be smart about these. They will give you benefit. They're very important, but you got to make sure you do them smartly. They will add a lot of specific benefits to the cross-country 5K, but you can also easily overdo them with the athletes, so please be smart about it. These workouts are very, very taxing to the athlete. They stress the aerobic system, anaerobic glycolytic system due to acid accumulation and overall muscle strength, partially the lactic system as we talked about already. Try your best to separate these from your meet days, because these will dominate your meet days. If you do them, say, on Wednesday and you've got to meet on Saturday, they'll still probably be feeling it. And definitely if you do them on Thursday, okay? What we do is, if we don't have a meet on Saturdays at this part of the year, I put them on Saturdays. And if we have like no school Mondays, there's always, for some reason, there's a Monday right in and around that time frame that we don't have school, that we end up doing these. Part of the reason is we have to travel about 20 to 30 minutes to get to them, so it's kind of challenging to do it. And I don't really want to do them after school. It just takes so much time to get them to practice, do this workout, which is a 2 to 2.5 hour practice, and then get them home. It's just, it's really hard to do on a school night and really demand that of them. So that's why I do it that way. You might have a hill that's right by where you are, so you don't have to worry about that, but that's how I've done them for me in my situation. You make them work for you in your situation. These end up being very high volume days because of the reps, recovery, jog, and cool down. Typically 10 miles, right? You've got your warm-up mile. Each rep, they're going to be going probably 1,200 meters, and then they're going to get a mile of recovery. I mean, if you're doing 4 of these, that's an extra 3 miles just on recovery, 3 miles just on the workout itself with the mile warm-up. I mean, you're already at 7 miles. If you do a 2 to 3 mile cool down, you're at 10 miles. So these are also a very high volume day. Another reason why you're going to separate these from the meets when and if you can. All right, so where can these actually fit into our fictitious macrocycle that we've been dealing with? So here is the 3rd week of specific prep, end of August, beginning of September, October, beginning of August, end of August, beginning of September. We've got our last medium hill intervals right here on this Thursday, and then we've got a meet here that we are planning to go to, and then we start the second to last week. It's also the part of the second to last 9-day macrocycle or microcycle in specific prep, and this is the first time that we would do it. I said that there's always a day off from school on Monday sometime around this time, and it's because of Labor Day. So this is when we're going to target our first one with the crew that I work with, 3 to 4 of them with 3 miles on the back, and again, it ends up being about a 10-mile day. And again, I'm going to go ahead and do my next one right here because I've got an open meet. I kind of do this. This is the weekend of a pretty a meet that the kids tend to enjoy a decent amount, so I've separated it here with a couple of days, and then I came back here and I've got a meet here that we are probably going to tempo run, but still I don't want to blast them here with something like that. I've also got a pretty hard week here. Again, we're getting out of specific prep into pre-comp, so there's some hard workouts. We've got a special endurance 2 workout, recovery run followed by some intervals, VO2 max, a tempo run, a long run, and then our second set of long hill intervals. They're also going to have bounds in here too. I should have put that up here, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. Probably going to do 3 to 4 on the first one, probably 3. Maybe my top group who's been doing them for a number of years could do 4, and then here probably everybody will do 4. Maybe that group of boys that have been with me for 3 years to this point will do 5, and then we'll come back the next week. We've got 2 weekends in a row where we don't have a meet. We don't have any meet this week, so we'll do another one, and then this will be our last one. We're only going to probably do 3 of them this year, the first week of pre-comp. And here's the reason why. If we look at October, the first week of October, the second week of pre-comp where you could do it, we could do it here, but this is our pre-state meet. It's really the biggest meet of our regular season up at FSU. It's where our state meet is, and it's a course that has a lot of hills on it. There's one hill on the back end that's called the Wall. While it's not long enough to be, a 4-minute hill, it's a hill that they're going to be on for, I think it's about 600 meters, something like that, so longer than a medium hill interval, and there's lots of hills all the way through it. So in my mind, it's always sort of served as kind of almost a long hill interval while it also is a race. So for me, we kind of get like 3.5 in if you think about it. Just this is the way it always works out with our situation. The first one is almost always on Labor Day. We end up getting 2 in before FSU. Again, I could do a long hill interval in here too, but the fact that it kind of serves as one, and I really want them to be ready for this meet, means that that's how it works for our situation. It might be different for you, where you could get 4 to 5 of them in and be safe about it and be very effective. Just for my situation and what we do, this is how I've always made it work. Then we get to the last 2 weeks of pre-comp. They're going to be doing a lot of high-intensity glycolytic work in here. Our county championships is right here, and then our districts start coming up. So after you've got this, you're not going to lose it here in these next little bit. You've just gotten to the point where they can really do this high-intensity work for the rest of the season. We're going to do a video series where I go through and fill in all these little blanks, but definitely I'm believing this is going to be a recovery run. This is probably going to be an off day the day after. This is either going to be an off day or a recovery run. You always want to do something, very, very easy, if not an off day the day after these long hill intervals, because they are so taxing. So let's get back to the presentation and wrap this up. All right, so what does this pair great with? Really long cool down just to get anything off of your legs, get the acid that's accumulated out of your system, get them back closer to center. I like to go 3 miles on these days. It does make it for a very high volume day, but I think it definitely helps them come back down to center if you can do 3 miles at a very easy pace. Again, not their aerobic threshold, but based on heart rate. Will add to overall aerobic development. That should not say 7 to 8 miles. That should actually say 10 miles. I just think I didn't maybe change it from the medium hill intervals, but 10 miles, 9 to 10 easily is what you get on these days. Basically, it's close to a long run. This is fine as long as it's on the back end. Don't try and do a recovery run beforehand and then do it. You're not going to get what you want out of the long hill intervals. They're hard enough as it is. Relaxation techniques, I've talked about these in previous videos. After cool down stretching, 5 minutes, find a place where you can prop your legs up, eyes closed, just nice and relaxed. It really helps you bring yourself back down to center. Recovery run the next day. Normally on the hills, I've said do a long run the next day or something like that, or a long run the day before. Something somewhat easy. It just, it really does help bring them back down to center, especially with the recovery run. 45 minutes at this point of the season is just so easy for them. And it's going to help them get back down to baseline because of all of the really high intensity. They've really challenged themselves on these long hill intervals, so give them either an off day or a 45-minute recovery run, something very easy just to bring themselves down and get themselves back down to center. Lifting. Hill work is power and force production related, but these days are also similar to VO2 max. So on the other hill days, it was a definite. You can certainly, in fact, I would encourage doing your lifting on those days, especially the quick explosive reps. VO2 max, I said definitely don't because of the acid accumulation. So where does this kind of fit in? Kind of right in the middle. I would try to avoid it if you could. But if you need to, just make sure that if they are going to lift, do these in the morning and do the lifting way after. You do your workout at 7:30 in the morning or whatever. Do your lift at after dinner or right before dinner, anywhere from 5 to 8 o'clock or something at night. You can do it and get it done effectively. There's probably better ways of doing it in your week to where it makes a little bit more sense, but it wouldn't be, the worst thing in the world, but it also wouldn't be the best thing in the world, if that makes sense. Plyometric exercises, longer plyometrics work, like bounding done before the hills. I like to do that also on these. Works the same central nervous system, muscle coordination and synchronization, and muscle elasticity. We are partially going for on these days the specific strength. This is similar to what I'd have my groups do before the short and medium hill intervals. Same kind of thing here, we've just built on it. So some key points to wrap this up. Long hill intervals target all parts needed for 5K cross-country success. All parts. That's why they're a very important workout. Specific strength improves in a way closely tied to what we've experienced in a cross-country 5K race because of the sustained nature of the reps. Specific aerobic capacity improves, like with VO2 max aerobic power intervals, because of the sustained nature and intensity of these reps. And specific acid buffering capacity improves because of the acid accumulation from sustained intensity. That will be very much like what they'll experience in the race. Those are a lot of the key things, if not all of the key things, that you're going to be trying to improve for success in the cross-country 5K. Rest should be extensive. These workouts are very challenging. Think VO2 max plus, so the rest should correspond to that with 10 to 12 minutes of active recovery. Be smart about the number of reps, as these will very much tax the athlete, either yourself or who you're training. Best done as transition from specific prep to pre-comp. Again, don't just throw these in there whenever. Don't say you're in the middle of general prep, so I'm going to do one of these. Don't do it. They link specific prep to pre-comp. By this point, they're very fit aerobically, have some strength gains from other hill workouts they've done, and they also have some acid buffering capacity built up from what you've done in specific prep. Extensive tempo first, then you've gone to intensive tempo, and maybe they're getting close to special 1 and special 2. So they're at the right part of the season to where they can do these effectively. It's also going to help prep them for the additional high-intensity workouts coming up in pre-comp, so they're perfectly situated right here as a transition. And with a good cool-down routine, 2 to 3 miles at the end, stretching, use relaxation techniques can help you bring down to baseline after these acid-accumulating days. You could also ice on these days if you want to. I've talked about in previous videos. I don't see the benefit that comes from icing if you're doing the long cool down, but if you were to ice, this would be a good day to do it also. So if you like this video, please think about liking or subscribing. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments down below, or have any comments, go and ask them in the comments down below. Some really great ones over the last couple days that I really enjoyed looking at. I'm going to do a video next on completing the specific prep part of your season, filling in those holes that we've looked at in the actual fictitious macrocycle that we were just looking at here a little bit ago. And I'm also going to be doing a VO2 max interval workout video tomorrow, which is Monday, July 27th. We're going to be doing a VO2 max intervals where some of my boys are going to be doing miles for the first time. Most of the group is doing 1200s, and a couple other groups in there doing some other distances that are right for them. So that'll also be coming here in the next couple days. And until next time, this has been Coachy TV.